In recent weeks, a geopolitical storm has been brewing over one of the world's most critical waterways. Former U.S. President Donald Trump sparked international controversy by publicly declaring the Panama Canal a vital national asset of America and suggesting the possibility of reclaiming it, even hinting at military action if necessary. The bold statement sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels and ignited fierce debates about sovereignty, trade power, and the future of global commerce. But the story doesn't end with political rhetoric. Behind the scenes, American financial interests moved swiftly and decisively. Through a massive transaction valued at nearly $23 billion, U.S.-based investment firm BlackRock acquired a controlling stake, roughly 90%, in the port facilities that anchor both ends of the Panama Canal. These strategic terminals, previously managed by companies linked to Hong Kong business magnate Li Ka-shing, have now been folded back into the American economic sphere. It appears the United States has successfully reasserted financial dominance over this crucial shipping corridor without firing a single shot. Yet throughout this entire episode, one player remained notably quiet: China. Beijing's muted response puzzled many international observers. Why would the world's second-largest economy show such little concern over losing operational influence at one of global trade's most important choke points? The answer, according to leading geopolitical analysts and industry experts, may lie thousands of miles to the north, in the frozen waters above the Arctic Circle. While Washington focused its attention on Central America, China and Russia have been quietly advancing an ambitious alternative: the Arctic Maritime Route, often called the Ice Silk Road. This northern passage, which has begun accepting commercial traffic with remarkable success, represents a potential game-changer in international shipping. Recent figures indicate that cargo volumes along this route have surged dramatically. Some estimates suggest a 35-fold increase compared to just a decade ago. To understand today's tensions, we need to appreciate what the Panama Canal represents. This engineering marvel, slicing through 81 kilometers of Central American terrain, serves as the world's most important artificial waterway. Since it first opened to maritime traffic over a century ago, it has functioned as nothing less than the jugular vein of international commerce, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and eliminating the need for the treacherous journey around South America's southern tip. The statistics tell a compelling story. Every single year, somewhere between 13 and 14,000 vessels navigate through this narrow corridor. These ships connect roughly 1,900 ports scattered across 170 countries and territories. The canal handles approximately 5% of all global trade by volume, a figure that might sound modest until you consider the sheer scale of worldwide commerce. We're talking about hundreds of millions of tons of cargo. Consumer electronics from Asia, grain from North America, automobiles from Europe, minerals from South America, and countless other goods that keep the modern economy functioning. For Panama itself, the canal is far more than just a waterway. It's the foundation of national prosperity. During the 2024 fiscal year, canal operations generated nearly $5 billion in direct revenue, accounting for roughly 6% of Panama's entire gross domestic product. But the economic impact extends far beyond toll collections. When you factor in related industries, logistics companies, port services, maritime insurance, warehouse operations, and the thousands of support businesses that cluster around major shipping routes, the canal system contributes an estimated 30% to Panama's overall economic output. Take away the canal, and you'd essentially be removing the engine from Panama's economy. The canal's history is inseparable from American power and ambition. Back in 1903, the United States played a pivotal role in Panama's independence from Colombia, and in return, Washington secured something extraordinary: permanent control over the canal zone and the right to operate the waterway in perpetuity. American engineers completed the massive construction project, American military forces defended the zone, and American interests profited handsomely from every ship that passed through. Historical records show that during the decades of American administration, canal operations generated more than $1.9 billion for the United States Treasury, a figure that would be worth many times that amount in today's dollars. This arrangement continued until the late 20th century. Growing international pressure, combined with Panamanian nationalism and changing geopolitical realities, eventually forced Washington to reconsider its position. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties, which established a gradual transition plan. Finally, at the stroke of midnight on December 31, 1999, as the world prepared to celebrate the new millennium, the United States formally transferred complete control of the Panama Canal to the Panamanian government. But here's the crucial detail that often gets overlooked. American influence never truly disappeared. Washington maintained deep economic ties with Panama, cultivating a relationship where Panamanian prosperity became increasingly linked to American markets. Today, approximately 74% of goods passing through Panama are ultimately destined for or originating from the United States. The annual trade value moving through this corridor exceeds $270 billion, making it absolutely critical to American commercial interests. Recent data from 2024 reveals the extent of this dependency. The canal processed more than 230 million tons of cargo that year. Of that massive volume, over two-thirds involved American exports, or imports in some capacity. For Washington, allowing any rival power to gain influence over this waterway represents an unacceptable strategic vulnerability. The China factor. A rising economic power enters the picture. America's renewed obsession with the Panama Canal cannot be understood without considering China's remarkable economic rise over the past 3 decades. As Chinese manufacturing exploded and its consumer market grew to rival America's, Beijing began looking for ways to secure and optimize its global supply chains. Chinese shipping companies expanded aggressively. Chinese ports processed ever larger volumes of containers, and Chinese investment capital started flowing into strategic infrastructure worldwide. This includes Latin America, where China emerged as a major trading partner and infrastructure investor. Chinese companies began operating ports, building railways, and financing development projects throughout the region. For Washington, watching Chinese influence grow in what Americans have long considered their backyard triggered alarm bells across both economic and security policy circles. The tension between the United States and China over trade, technology, and global influence has intensified dramatically in recent years. Tariffs, export controls, technology restrictions, and competing visions for international economic governance have created what many analysts describe as a new form of great power competition. In this context, shipping routes take on heightened importance. Whoever controls the critical choke points of global commerce, the canals, straits, and passages that channel the vast majority of international trade, holds significant leverage over the world economy. For years, American policymakers discussed reclaiming greater influence over the Panama Canal, but political realities made direct action difficult. Panama is a sovereign nation, and any overt military intervention would trigger massive international backlash. The situation remained in this uncomfortable stalemate until the political landscape shifted dramatically with Trump's return to power. Trump's bold gambit, capital, and coercion. When Trump publicly declared that the Panama Canal should be considered an American national asset, he wasn't simply making a rhetorical point. His administration began exploring concrete options for reasserting control. The approach ultimately combined 2 elements: financial power and the implicit threat of military force. The financial component materialized in March 2025, when BlackRock, one of the world's largest investment management firms with assets exceeding $10 trillion, announced a stunning acquisition. For a purchase price of $22.8 billion, BlackRock obtained 90% ownership stakes in the Port of Balboa and the Port of Cristobal, the two crucial terminals that serve as gateways to the Panama Canal on the Pacific and Atlantic sides, respectively. These ports had been operated by Hutchison Ports, part of the business empire controlled by Li Ka-shing, one of Asia's wealthiest entrepreneurs. The sale effectively transferred operational control from a Hong Kong-based conglomerate to American financial interests. While BlackRock operates as a private company rather than a government entity, the strategic implications were immediately clear. The United States had secured leverage over the canal's operations without needing to negotiate with Panama's government. Control of these port facilities provides enormous influence. Ships don't just pass through the canal, they dock at these terminals to load and unload cargo, refuel, undergo maintenance and transfer containers. Whoever manages these ports can set fees, establish priorities for docking access, determine which vessels receive preferential treatment, and potentially restrict access altogether based on various criteria. In theory, this creates opportunities for discriminatory practices, charging higher fees to Chinese vessels, delaying their transit, imposing additional inspections, or even denying service under the guise of security concerns. Simultaneously, Trump made explicit threats about potentially using military means to ensure unrestricted American access to the canal. Reports emerged that the Pentagon had received directives to develop credible military options for securing the waterway. Trump's statements emphasized that America had paid an enormous price, in money, engineering expertise, and American lives, to build the canal, and that giving it away had been a historic mistake. Panama's President José Raúl Mulino responded forcefully, declaring that his nation would never surrender its sovereignty over the canal regardless of American pressure or threats. The Panamanian government emphasized that the 1977 treaties had been legally binding, internationally recognized agreements, and that the canal's transfer had been completed according to established international law. Why military force isn't really an option? Despite Trump's aggressive rhetoric, most serious analysts agree that actual military seizure of the Panama Canal would be profoundly irrational for several interconnected reasons. First, consider the economic consequences. The canal generates approximately $18 million in toll revenue every single day. This income flows from a vast network spanning 1,900 ports across 170 countries. If the United States attempted a military takeover, international shipping companies would face impossible decisions. Many would refuse to use a canal under disputed control, fearing their vessels could be detained or their cargoes seized in retaliation by other nations. If even a significant fraction of cargo had to reroute, the global impact would be staggering. Ships avoiding the Panama Canal would need to either use the Suez Canal, adding thousands of kilometers to many routes, or sail around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, adding even more distance. Industry studies suggest such rerouting would increase shipping costs per container by somewhere between 9 and 22%. Those increased costs would ultimately flow through to consumers worldwide in the form of higher prices for virtually everything from electronics to food. The second problem involves what economists call systemic risk. The global shipping network functions as an integrated system, and it's already under strain. The Suez Canal, which handles roughly 12% of global trade, has faced serious disruptions due to regional conflicts, particularly tensions related to the Israeli-Palestinian situation. The Houthi movement in Yemen has launched attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, forcing many shipping companies to avoid that route entirely. If both the Suez and Panama Canals faced serious disruption simultaneously, the world would confront a genuine shipping crisis. The International Shipping Association has warned that such a scenario could reduce global GDP by between 0.5% and 1 full percentage point. That might sound abstract, but it translates to hundreds of billions of dollars in lost economic activity. Factories idling because they can't get components, store shelves running short of products, food exports rotting in ports, and a cascade of economic pain rippling through interconnected supply chains. Third, there's the diplomatic catastrophe such an action would trigger. Even America's closest allies would find it nearly impossible to support the military seizure of another nation's sovereign infrastructure. International institutions like the United Nations would face enormous pressure to condemn the action and potentially impose sanctions. Latin American nations, many of which already view American regional policy with suspicion, would likely unite in opposition. The long-term damage to America's international standing could take decades to repair. Consider the practical logistics as well. The Panama Canal isn't just a ditch. It's a complex system requiring thousands of skilled workers, constant maintenance, sophisticated computer systems, and detailed operational knowledge. A military occupation force would need to somehow keep all that functioning while dealing with potential sabotage, worker strikes, and hostile local populations. The historical record of military occupations managing complex civilian infrastructure is not encouraging. For all these reasons, most experts believe Trump's military threats serve primarily as negotiation tactics, attempts to pressure Panama into accepting American demands through intimidation rather than actual intentions to invade. But the port acquisition strategy is very real, and it does provide substantial leverage even without military action. China's Arctic alternative, the Ice Silk Road. So this brings us back to the intriguing question: why has China responded with apparent indifference to American maneuvering around the Panama Canal? Well, the answer increasingly appears to be that Beijing has been developing an entirely different solution to the challenge of efficient long-distance shipping. The Arctic Maritime Route represents one of the most ambitious infrastructure and navigation projects in modern history. As global temperatures rise and Arctic ice cover diminishes during summer months, previously impassable northern waters are becoming viable shipping lanes. Both China and Russia have recognized the strategic potential here and have invested heavily in making this route operational. The Arctic route actually encompasses several possible passages. The Northeast Passage runs along Russia's northern coastline, threading between the Russian mainland and the Arctic islands above. The Northwest Passage cuts through the Canadian Arctic archipelago and along Greenland's coast. And the Central Passage, which is still largely theoretical, would cross directly over the North Pole through international waters. It's the shortest possible route, but honestly, also the most challenging due to heavy ice conditions. Right now, China and Russia have focused their immediate efforts on the Northeast Passage, which offers the best combination of feasibility and strategic advantage. Here's how the route works in practice. Goods begin their journey at logistics centers in western Russia, such as the facilities near Moscow. From there, freight trains carry containers approximately 1,200 kilometers north to Arkhangelsk, a major port city on Russia's White Sea coast. This city, founded in the late 16th century, is now being modernized and expanded to handle growing Arctic shipping traffic. From Arkhangelsk, vessels enter the Northeast Passage proper, sailing east along Russia's northern coast. This section covers roughly 5,600 kilometers, navigating through the Barents Sea, past the Kara Sea, through the Laptov Sea and East Siberian Sea, and finally into the Chukchi Sea. During peak summer months, much of this route is now ice-free or features only scattered ice that vessels can navigate without icebreaker assistance. During other seasons, Russian nuclear-powered icebreakers clear paths for commercial traffic. The route reaches its eastern terminus at Cape Dezhnev in the Bering Strait, the narrow passage separating Russia from Alaska. From there, ships enter the Pacific Ocean and turn south, sailing approximately 6,600 kilometers along established routes to reach Chinese ports like Shanghai, Ningbo, or Qingdao. The total distance for the Arctic route comes to roughly 13,200 kilometers. Voyage time typically ranges from 20 to 25 days, depending on ice conditions, weather, and the specific vessels involved. Now, if you compare this to the traditional shipping route between Western Europe and China, which involves traveling through the Mediterranean, transiting the Suez Canal, crossing the Indian Ocean, and rounding Southeast Asia, That conventional path requires approximately 36 days, nearly 2 weeks longer than the Arctic alternative. For shipping companies, time is money. Faster voyages mean ships can complete more trips per year. Fuel costs are lower for shorter distances, and perishable or time-sensitive goods reach their destinations more quickly. The infrastructure behind the Arctic route. Making the Arctic route viable requires more than just mapping open water. It demands massive infrastructure investment, specialized vessels, sophisticated navigation systems, and international cooperation. Exactly what China and Russia have been building. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June 2024, a major milestone was reached. A Chinese shipping company signed a comprehensive cooperation agreement with Rosatom, Russia's state atomic energy corporation. Rosatom might seem like an odd partner for shipping development, but they operate Russia's fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers, the world's most powerful ice-breaking vessels, capable of crushing through meters-thick ice that would stop conventional ships. The agreement established a joint venture to construct a fleet of ice-capable container ships specifically designed for year-round Arctic operations. The initial plan calls for building 5 vessels classified as ARC-7, a designation indicating they can operate independently in ice up to 1.5 meters thick. The first ship is scheduled to enter service in 2027, with the others following at regular intervals. These aren't ordinary cargo ships. They feature reinforced hulls with special ice-resistant steel, powerful engines capable of pushing through resistant ice fields, enhanced navigation systems for operating in conditions where traditional GPS may be unreliable, and crew facilities designed for extreme cold environments where temperatures can plunge to -40 degrees Celsius. The goal is ambitious. Transform the Northeast Passage from a seasonal summer route into a year-round shipping corridor. Even during the darkest, coldest months of Arctic winter, these specialized vessels would continue moving cargo between Asia and Europe, supported by Russian icebreakers when necessary. The numbers suggest this strategy is already showing results. According to Russian government data, cargo volumes along the Northeast Passage have exploded over the past decade. In 2014, only about 4 million tons of goods transited this route, mostly Russian domestic cargo like oil, natural gas, and minerals being shipped from Arctic development projects. By 2024, that figure had surged to 46 million tons, representing more than an 11-fold increase in just 10 years. Russia has set an even more ambitious target, reaching 270 million tons of annual cargo by 2030. That would represent roughly the same volume as the Panama Canal currently handles, transforming the Arctic route from an alternative path into a major artery of global commerce. The strategic advantages of the Arctic route. So why are China and Russia investing so heavily in this northern corridor? Well, several factors make it strategically attractive beyond just shorter distances. First, there's the matter of cost. The Panama Canal charges substantial fees. A large container ship might pay upwards of $200,000 for a single transit. These fees accumulate quickly when you consider that major shipping lines move dozens or even hundreds of vessels through the canal annually. The Arctic route, by contrast, involves much lower toll payments, particularly for the sections passing through international waters. Second, the Panama Canal faces physical limitations that restrict which ships can use it. The canal's locks measure just 33.5 meters in width and can accommodate vessels up to 294 meters in length. This means the largest modern container ships, the so-called mega ships that can carry 20,000 or more containers, simply cannot fit through. These vessels must use alternative routes regardless of the canal's location. The Arctic route, passing through open ocean for most of its length, faces no such restrictions. Any vessel capable of handling Arctic conditions can use it, regardless of size. Third, there's the question of geopolitical control. The United States has demonstrated its ability and willingness to exert influence over the Panama Canal through both economic leverage and implicit military pressure. Washington's relationship with Egypt gives it significant influence over the Suez Canal as well. China has long worried about potential American actions to restrict Chinese access to these critical choke points during any future confrontation. The Arctic route substantially reduces this vulnerability. Russia controls the coastal waters along the Northeast Passage and has made clear its intention to support Chinese shipping access. While Canada theoretically controls parts of the Northwest Passage, the relationship between the United States and Canada has grown more complex and occasionally strained, making it less reliable as an American pressure point.